Why is it that the more aware we become, the more exhausted we feel? You did everything right. You healed, awakened, surrendered, and yet something still aches, quietly, constantly, like a low hum in your soul that never quite fades. It's strange, isn't it? This paradox we don't talk about, that the very clarity you fought so hard to gain has made the world feel more distant, that seeing through the illusion didn't bring peace, but a hollow kind of silence. You stopped chasing, but also stopped feeling. You let go, but nothing came to fill the space. So here you are, aware, conscious, and disconnected. This video isn't for everyone. It's not motivation. It's not affirmation. It's a mirror, and only those ready to face the silence inside will see what it reflects. Because sometimes the truth doesn't set you free right away. First, it empties you. But what if that emptiness isn't the end? What if it's the beginning of something deeper? Let's begin. From the moment we're old enough to understand words, society hands us a map. Success means happiness. Productivity means worth. More means better. Chase it, earn it, hustle, until you're finally enough. And like obedient wanderers, we follow. You were told that if you just did more hours, more effort, more control, life would reward you. That clarity, peace, and purpose were outcomes waiting at the end of your to-do list. But no one ever mentioned the burnout. No one warned you about the soul-deep fatigue that follows constant striving. Because here's the truth, they don't advertise. The map was never made for you. It was made to keep you moving, not awakening. Carl Jung, the quiet rebel of psychology, once said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. That includes chasing dreams that aren't yours, hustling for validation you don't even want, and mistaking exhaustion for enlightenment. Let that land. We've been programmed to confuse stimulation with aliveness, busyness with meaning, ambition with awakening. But when the noise dies down, when the applause fades, and you're left alone with yourself, what remains? The silence. And for many, that silence is unbearable. So we chase again, not out of inspiration, but to escape that hollow pause. Because we've mistaken movement for progress, noise for purpose. But what if the path isn't forward? What if it's inward? Here's the quiet twist most people miss. What if your awakening was just a new mask over the same wound? A new identity wrapped in old wounds. You're not chasing truth. You're chasing the feeling of being woke, spiritual, enlightened. But deep down, you're still operating from fear, from lack, from the need to be seen. So let me ask you, have you ever mistaken the performance of awakening for actual transformation? Because that right there might be the moment your real journey begins. It doesn't happen with fireworks. There's no dramatic crash, no grand epiphany. It's quieter than that, subtler, more terrifying. It's the moment you realize the identity you built your life around, the achiever, the fixer, the seeker, is gone, and in its place, not a new self, but nothing, just a vast, unnerving stillness. You're not who you were, but you're not yet who you'll become. You're floating in between, untethered, unnamed, and that limbo is a kind of death most people never prepare for. I once knew someone, let's call him Eli, soft-spoken, deep-eyed, the kind of man who carried silence like a secret for years. He was everyone's rock, the strong one, the wise one, until one day, something in him broke, but not loudly. No one noticed. He didn't cry, didn't collapse. He just withdrew, slowly, gently, like the tide receding in the night. When I finally asked him what happened, he said something I'll never forget. I realized the person I spent my whole life trying to become was never me. And now, I don't know what's left. He didn't rebuild, he remembered. He didn't need fixing. He was going through what Carl Jung called the dark night of the soul, a sacred psychological breaking point where the ego begins to dissolve and the real self begins to stir. But before rebirth, there is chaos. The ego doesn't leave quietly. It thrashes, it panics, it mourns its own illusion. And in that mourning, something shifts. You start seeing how much of yourself was a defense mechanism, crafted not from truth, but from survival. You didn't become wise. You became hyper-aware to avoid pain. Our drive wasn't passion. It was proof that you mattered. You didn't awaken. You adapted. This is the truth. No one tells you. Awakening is not always a rise. Sometimes it's a fall, a descent into everything you spent your life running from. The anxiety, the numbness, the emptiness. It's not a malfunction. It's the system shutting down to reset. The mind knows something has ended. The soul knows something deeper is beginning. But the space in between, that's the hardest part, because it feels like nothing. And we're not taught how to sit with nothing. You no longer crave success. You stop chasing validation, but instead of peace, there's only absence. The world keeps spinning, but you can't find your place in it. And this is where most people give up. They think something is wrong with them. They try to reattach to the old self, scroll, distract, achieve, pretend, anything to not feel this void. But Eli didn't do that. He stayed in the silence. He let the old self rot. And in that space of ruin, he didn't rebuild. He remembered. He remembered who he was before the masks, before the striving, before he learned to abandon himself to be accepted. And so I ask you this, gently but firmly. What if the stillness you're afraid of is the doorway to who you really are? Because this moment, this quiet collapse is not the end, it's the edge. And only those brave enough to fall will ever learn to rise without pretending. Healing doesn't fix you, it softens you. It teaches you how to live with what still aches. It's not about erasing the wound, silencing the pain, or becoming normal again. No, real healing is the art of living with the wound without letting it define you. It's not the absence of darkness. It's learning to walk in the dark with a small, steady flame in your hand. You stop asking, when will this end? And start whispering, how do I walk with this pain without letting it walk me? That's when the shift begins. You pull back, not to escape the world, but to hear yourself again. You step into solitude, not because you're broken, but because the noise has kept you numb for too long. You journal not to solve, but to witness. You turn off your phone, not as a rebellion, but as a return. Every quiet act becomes a sacred defiance against a world that demands your constant availability and performance. And slowly, something changes. One night, in the silence, you feel it. Not joy, not clarity, but something subtler, softer, a flicker, like a match struck in a cave. It doesn't banish the dark, but it changes how you move through it. You're still in the void, But the void no longer feels like punishment. It feels holy. That's the paradox. The more you surrender control, the more inner power you access. The less you chase peace, the more peaceful you become. You stop trying to be the healed version of yourself, and instead, you begin to live as someone who doesn't need to hide the healing. You thought you'd rise, but all you did was dissolve. This isn't triumph, it's tenderness. This isn't a breakthrough, it's a becoming. And that faint warmth you feel now, that's not your ego resurrecting, it's your soul remembering. To understand why your inner world feels like a war zone, we have to enter the architecture of the psyche. The map. Carl Jung spent his life sketching in shadows. Start here. The persona. This is the mask you wear, not because you're fake, but because the world told you you had to be likable, polite, productive, attractive. So you crafted a version of yourself that could survive in public. It smiles, it nods, it fits in. But when you go home and the door closes, it falls apart. Then comes the shadow. Not evil, not demonic, just repressed. All the parts of you you've denied to keep the mask intact. The anger you weren't allowed to feel. The desires you judged. The fears you buried, the truth you swallowed. The shadow is not darkness, it's your abandoned truth. Jung didn't ask us to fix these parts. He asked us to integrate them. He knew that the more we reject our darkness, the more it controls us. You don't conquer your shadow by pretending it's not there. You meet it, sit with it, listen to what it's been trying to say all along. Every time you snap at someone and regret it, every time you feel triggered by something small, every time you overwork, overshare, overthink, your shadow is speaking loudly, desperately, not to sabotage you, but to be seen, to be healed. Now think about the individuation process. Jung's term for becoming whole, not perfect, not enlightened, whole. It's the long, slow, sacred journey of bringing together your light and your dark, your mind and your body, your persona and your soul, not by eliminating the bad parts, but by learning to hold them without shame. Imagine waking up and no longer needing to perform, no longer living a double life, pleasing on the outside, aching on the inside. That's individuation. It's not glamorous. It's not Instagrammable. It's hard. It's slow, but it's real. And here's the line that unravels most of what we're taught. We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, Jung wrote, but by making the darkness conscious. That one sentence carries the weight of a lifetime. You've been told to think positive, affirm abundance, raise your vibration. But if you do all that while secretly hating who you are in the dark, you're not manifesting from truth. You're spiritualizing your shame. What if you stopped trying to fix yourself? What if you stopped fighting the dark? What if, instead, you lit a candle and sat beside it? Because the goal is not to be shadowless. The goal is to be able to live with the shadow and not let it drive the car. To say, I see you, you're part of me, but you don't get to lead anymore. This is the real work. This is what healing looks like when you strip away the glitter. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. And that remembering changes everything. Who told you who you are? Was it your parents with their subtle expectations and unspoken fears? Was it the school system reducing your worth to grades and obedience? Was it your peers shaping your identity through rejection and approval? Or was it 1,000 curated images on your phone, whispering who you should be to feel seen? You call it yourself, but pause. How much of it did you choose? This is not a condemnation, it's a calling. Because once you realize that most of your personality is actually a survival strategy, a response to conditioning, not an expression of essence, you begin to question everything. And questioning, though terrifying, is the first breath of freedom. We spend decades becoming someone that culture claps for. We learn the right words, the right clothes, the right angles to present, but in doing so, we dim. We become a reflection, not a flame, a copy, not a soul. And deep inside, we feel it, the dissonance, the fatigue of holding up a mask that no longer fits. So ask yourself, who would I be without the need to be liked? The moment you ask this, you start remembering. Your voice softens, your pace slows. You no longer perform your truth, you speak it. You no longer sell your time for validation. You guard it like gold, and slowly, clarity rises, not the kind that shouts, but the kind that feels still. Living transparently isn't about confessing everything to everyone. It's about no longer betraying yourself in silence. It's about waking up and choosing deliberately, gently, not to abandon who you are for the comfort of being accepted. And yes, it's uncomfortable. There's grief in letting go of the version of you that made the world feel safer. But there's grace too, because in that letting go, you don't become less, you become whole. So here's the quiet truth. You were never broken. You were just buried under who you thought you had to be. Now it's time to rise. No one talks about what happens after the awakening. You expect fireworks, a steady stream of insight, some grand unfolding of purpose. Instead, silence, not the peaceful kind, the kind that feels like being paused in a life you no longer recognize. You're not in pain, but you're not exactly alive either. It's as if your emotions have gone still, as if someone pressed mute on your soul. And now you just exist. You're not lost. You're not broken. You're just between stories. This is the second awakening, not the one where the illusion shatters, but the one where the identity after illusion doesn't rush in to replace it. You begin to live without the need for meaning. You no longer search, you simply are. And there's something quietly revolutionary about that. Because for the first time, you're not reaching. You're not scripting your future with desperate fingers. You're not narrating your life for the approval of others. You're breathing, present, undefined, real. It may not feel glorious. It may not make for a great quote, but this stillness, this quiet presence, is a kind of power no one can give you and no one can take away. You're no longer performing clarity. You're living the question. You don't come back from this journey with fireworks. You return quietly. There's no parade, no final boss, just you and a life that now feels different, even when it looks the same. The world stayed the same, but you became still. You walk slower, speak softer, choose fewer things, but mean them more. You learn to say no, not out of fear, but out of self-respect. You live within your limits, not as a punishment, but as a devotion to peace. And in this simplicity, a new kind of power emerges, the kind that doesn't need attention to exist. You find holiness in the mundane. Washing your hands becomes a ritual. Cleaning your space becomes an act of self-honor. Sitting still becomes a homecoming. You don't need a reason to feel okay. You don't need a breakthrough to be enough. You are finally deeply present, and that presence radiates. You are no longer searching for the life you thought you needed. You are living the life your soul has been quietly asking for all along. And that is more than awakening. That is arrival. Let's close this together. You've walked through the ache, the unraveling, the silence. You've let go of identities, shed illusions, and sat with the kind of stillness most people spend their whole lives avoiding. And now, you're not healed in the way the world defines healing. You're whole in a quieter, deeper way. You see, we were taught to believe peace would feel like fireworks, like confidence roaring, or happiness exploding into applause. But peace, real peace, feels like a quiet exhale. It's not loud. It's not performative. It's subtle, sacred, almost invisible. But once you taste it, nothing else compares. Here's the final paradox. Everyone wants to be loved, seen, chosen, but few ever pause long enough to love themselves, not the glamorous version, but the one who cries quietly at night, who doubts, who aches, who tries to sit with that version of yourself without flinching. That is love. That is arrival. You're not manifesting the life you want. You're remembering the one that already lives inside you, not through noise, but through presence, not through chasing, but through becoming. So breathe, not because you have it all figured out, but because, finally, you don't have to. You're already home. You've changed, haven't you? Not in the way others can see, not with new titles, new clothes, or louder confidence, but in that quiet place inside. Something has shifted. You still look like you. You still speak the same way, but you're no longer the one who needed to be everything for everyone. You've softened, deepened, come home. So now ask yourself, who are you? When you no longer need to prove, maybe you don't have the answer yet. Maybe you don't need one. Because becoming isn't a performance, it's a remembering. If this space stirred something inside you, not a scream, not a fire, but a small, still recognition, leave a single dot in the comments. A quiet way to say, I'm here, I see me, I remember. No need to explain, no need to impress, just a pause, a presence, a period. Let it be enough.